Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. After we've reviewed Reflector,
yes,
by Arcade Fire, I think the second most requested album this year has been Eminem's The Marshall Mathers LP2, which recently came out. You guys have been pining for us to review this album, and we're not going to waste your time. So, without further ado, Eminem's new record, The Marshall Mathers LP2. Eminem is maybe one of the best rappers of all time. In fact, he has a song on his new record called Rap God, which I think is an apt assessment. He's pretty good at what he does, but that's, my personal opinion. He's had a slew of albums over the past, 2.5 decades. Tom, you're an expert when it comes to Eminem. You have been listening to Eminem longer than I've known you, and that's saying something. We've known each other for like half our lives.
Yeah, that's true.
Would you give us a brief history of Eminem, where he's come from, up until this point?
So, well, as far as where he comes from before his rap career started, you actually get a good breakdown of that by just listening to his music.
Yeah,
I mean, he talks a lot about his history, his upbringing in Detroit, some of those family issues that he ran into growing up. The guy really rose to fame in the late 90s with the Slim Shady LP and the Marshall Mathers LP, which came out kind of back to back. And wow, what a 1-2 punch to start a career.
No
Got him a lot of attention because, well, first off, several reasons. It was one of those times where the context, the time, the era was just perfect for him. Hip-hop needed a fresh face. They needed some reality. They needed someone with some aggression. And I mean, there were other artists, that were able to do that, but not at the commercially successful and accessible level that Eminem was able to. It really moved rap in a different direction, and he kind of became the face of this new generation of rappers. And the reason he was able to do that is not just because of the context, but because the music was good enough.
Right.
The music was good enough to stand up to that. I mean, it's one of those like Nirvana, Nevermind situations, where not only was the music awesome, but the timing was immaculate. It just, the world needed Eminem. And for a lot of people at that time, actually, to them, the world did not need Eminem. There was a lot of protesting, a lot of controversy. But I would say...
and that just fueled the fire.
Exactly. I would say the music world needed him.
Yes.
So, after that, it's been really interesting kind of keeping up with his discography. I thought that the Eminem show was fantastic. I mentioned the Slim Shady and Marshall Mathers LPs being kind of a 1-2 punch. I thought the Eminem show continued that very terrifically. From there... Encore was kind of hit and miss for me, and then you also had Relapse and Recovery, which we both actually, we're in the minority of people who actually really liked Relapse.
Right, and he actually took a hiatus between Encore and Relapse. Like 5 years he just did not spend on music, which, I remember going through that period. I mean, you almost forgot about the guy.
Yeah, it's true.
He just disappeared off the map, and then all of a sudden he's back with back-to-back albums, Relapse and Recovery. We've reviewed both of those.
Yes.
We liked Relapse, did not like Recovery. He definitely, you could see, was going for two different things on those records. Relapse was more personal and more, I would say, abstract. I mean, he was really shooting for a concept on that record, where Recovery was just more straightforward. It was single-based, reeked of corporate America. It just was not very good, but a lot of people really liked it, and a lot of people really liked a lot of the singles that came off of that album. His work with Rihanna, that kind of sets up, I think, the Marshall Mathers LP2. It's now been, 3 years since we've had anything from Eminem. Tom, what was your take over the change in sound on Marshall Mathers LP2?
The change in sound, that was one thing I was really curious about, because obviously naming it the Marshall Mathers LP2 is inevitably going to draw comparisons with LP1. And it's not like Eminem doesn't know that.
No,
he knows that, and he's doing it deliberately. And he said that, he was taking a long time on this album because he wanted to make sure that he had the right set of songs that would live up to the name that he'd established with the Marshall Mathers LP1. So from there, you can kind of look at the quality of the songs and the sound and how they compare with that, and whether it's worthy of the name. So first off, the sound to me, well, it starts out with the track Bad Guy, which to me felt like kind of a continuation, a combination of like the tracks Stan and Kim, where you have this kind of, bad guy character interacting with someone else. It's a long song, kind of ballsy for starting out a long album, which typically you don't get like 6 or 7 minute rap tracks.
And in fairness, it does shift at like 5 minutes in.
It does. There's a lot of variety in there.
There is. And it's a little bit slower style than everything else that you hear on the album. It does a good job of setting up your expectations of what you're going to hear on the rest of LP2. I feel like, it doesn't... I don't know. I kind of struggled with that track as a lead-off track.
I totally agree, because it was a little bit all over the place. I think some of the rapping was really good, but I wasn't really able to follow the story as well as I could in subsequent tracks.
Absolutely.
Now, when it comes to the beats in general and the sound, on Marshall Mathers LP 1, which features production by Dr. Dre, you had a lot more of those late 90s kind of stark, very contrasting Dr. Dre beats, similar to what you heard on Dr. Dre's Sonic 2001. So you had, just the pounding kind of kick, snare sounds, kind of typical hip-hop sounds, and any of the kind of background or melody was it was very focused, it was very precise and clean. Here, I feel like things are kind of washed together a lot more. The beats aren't quite as heavy, they're not quite as thick. You listen to tracks like Survival and even Berserk, where you're getting a lot more of those kind of classic rock samples, which wasn't really all that present on Eminem's past work. So that's actually where he's kind of forging new ground for himself.
And while Dr. Dre was, I think he did help produce part of this album, there was a slew of other producers, notable producers that were used on this album. Right, and it definitely, you can hear the other producers' impact on the sound of the beats, of the production, all that stuff.
It's much more mid-rangey. You get a lot more like kind of big, like almost arena anthemic guitar even on tracks. But it, for some reason for me, it doesn't feel quite as booming. It doesn't feel quite as big. It feels a little washed underneath the mix.
It's to me, it's almost like this album is borderline girl talk with Eminem on it. And at times, I mean, not to like girl talk's extreme, but there's definitely like I can draw comparisons because of all the samples that are used here.
Yeah, he is referencing a lot of other work, and sometimes for better or worse, Rhyme or Reason samples Zombies, Time of the Season. I know you weren't a fan of that one.
No, I mean, he changed all the lyrics. He sings on the chorus, which we'll get to that part in a second. But don't touch the Zombies. I mean, please, Odyssey and Oracle, don't touch that album.
Yeah,
just leave it alone.
Now, some of the others, I would say that Billy Squires' The Stroke, and Joe Walsh, I believe, on track So Far, track 13, he samples there, and I don't feel like those are quite as sacred. I think that you can play around with those, and I think he does a pretty good job of incorporating them, especially in Berserk, which I thought was one of the highlights of the album. I think
Berserk might be one of the best rap songs I've ever heard, period. Like, I just think the way he is able to rap and incorporate so many different hip-hop styles in that. I mean, he's almost doing like a citation of history in that song. And I think that song's just monumental. And plus, I think that the chorus is really good on that song. So let's dive into that piece, because I think that's kind of key to understanding and dissecting this album. So, so this album is littered with choruses that, I mean, one thing that Eminem has just gotten infatuated with over the years is this idea that he has to have some catchy ass chorus on every single track. The purpose, the reason why people listen to your albums, Eminem, has nothing to do with the catchy chorus.
It's true.
That's just what gets you played on the radio, and your true fans don't give a shit about that. Your album would go diamond without any of these choruses. He has so many choruses in here that have some generic female vocalist just singing something kind of slow and soft, and like Legacy is a prime example of it. Just adds no value, and all it is the same line repeated over and over again like a commercial playing, so the song gets stuck in your head. But the real grit of this album, the real value add, is Eminem's verses. He is brilliant in the verses. His delivery, his just attitude, his lyrics, his just intensity, the raw, just visceral intensity of his rapping and his delivery is bar none the best thing about this album. It's the best thing about anything he's ever done, but he chose it off on this album.
And I would go as far to say that the wordplay and lyricism presented on this album, I think, is the best I've heard of Eminem.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's including the Marshall Mathers LP 1. I think that was a more monumental album because of the timing and because of the topics he was addressing. But here he does it with so much more just mastery.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's insane. Now, I want to jump back real quick to the choruses. You mentioned the female vocalist not really being up to snuff, and I want to make another comparison to Marshall Mathers LP 1 in that sense, because the best tracks on that album, the most memorable ones, are the ones where Eminem is spitting the chorus.
Yeah.
You look at
spitting.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Not singing.
Right.
Not crooning.
Not trying to sing. But failing on his face when he tries to sing.
Listen to Kill You.
Right.
Listen to Drug Ballad, Under the Influence. those songs stick out to me. And the songs on this album that really stuck out to me were the ones where Eminem controlled the chorus. Even like, while I don't think it was one of the stronger tracks, So Much Better worked for that reason. Berserk worked for that reason, especially Brainless, track 10. One of the highlights on the album, that one, more than any other track, sounded like it could have been on Marshall Mathers LP1.
And Brainless also had my favorite beat on the album. Now, Kendrick Lamar shows up on track 14, Love Game, and I actually thought that track was really good. I mean, Kendrick Lamar has been featured on every hip-hop album for the past two and a half years, and he deserves it because he's brilliant. I mean, like, I think if Eminem is the rapper of the 2000s, then Kendrick Lamar is the rapper of the 2010s. And so it's nice to see the pairing there. I wish there was a little bit more of that. In all honesty, you could go do away with most of the choruses on this album if you had more guest spots of just rap-based choruses. Like so many artists have done before. It would have kept the focus on the verses, and the verses are what's key on this album.
The female vocalists just don't bring it. You listen to Stan from Marshall Mathers LP1, and it worked there because Dido has the voice to match, and that was also already a song. But here, I mean, you listen to tracks like Survival, Legacy, Asshole, those three right in a row. The female vocals in the chorus, they just sound kind of lazy.
Yeah, they totally do.
They don't at all match the energy that Eminem's presenting in the verses. I mean, he's killing it. And then it gets to this chorus, which is like, this is my legacy.
Like, and it just loses all intensity. And there's a couple tracks on here, Berserk included, where Eminem does, he actually sings. And on Berserk, I think for whatever reason, that song just works. It's a great chorus. It gets stuck in my head the way it should get stuck in my head because of quality, not because it's just being repeated over and over again, even though they do. But on Rhyme or Reason and even Stronger Than I Was, track 11, Eminem is trying to sing, and he is just failing miserably. Like, it sounds awful. It's unlistenable at times how off-key he can be. And not to mention that I think that he uses a bit more cheesy lyrics in choruses because he's trying to keep it simple. He's trying to keep it so that it gets stuck in your head and I just think it gets cheesy real quick. So getting off the choruses. Without the choruses, this may be Eminem's best work. It's the choruses that bring some of these tracks down. And then just quite frankly, this is a hit or miss album. Some of these tracks are great. I really, really like Eminem's part in track 7, Asshole. I really don't like the chorus, but then after that you have Berserk, Rap God, which I'm pretty sure he sets a world record for like words per minute or
he's just nailing it.
I mean, that song, it's the only song, I mean, he had to put out a good performance for a track called Rap God. And I think he made a case for it, right?
And I have to draw a comparison there to another rapper who came out with an album this year that calls himself a rap god, and that's Kanye West. And we both really liked Yeezus. It was a concise 10-track album. I think that you could pick 10 tracks out of here and make an album probably even stronger than Yeezus. But the fact is, this is 16 tracks, and you can pick out at least 6 that just don't cut it.
This is over 78 minutes of music, and really, it doesn't need to be. It's unnecessarily long. This could have easily been a 50 to 55-minute album and still had way more of a proportionate balance of good tracks to bad tracks. And really, I feel like the hit or miss is what brings us down out of the upper 80s for me. I think, though, that the good things he does on this album are so good that it will keep me coming back listening to this album. I still like this album. I still would recommend this album. It's just you're going to have to sit through some absolute crappy sound to get through some of the really good tasting stuff. It's kind of like, a salad where you just have something really nasty. Like, for me, it's like
you just put the wrong dressing on
it. Something like I had a salad today at work, and it was like I had beets on it, and I had to eat the beets to get to the lettuce.
Why would you do that to yourself?
I don't know. It's healthy, apparently. These choruses aren't healthy. You just have to get through them. And that's just kind of the downside of this album. I'm excited that Eminem's still making music. I'm excited that he's continuing to try to push his craft. I've come to the conclusion, though, that Eminem, he is a rapper first and foremost. He is not a songwriter, and he's not a producer. And I really think that he needs that key team. He needs somebody crafting the songs and crafting the album to keep the album flow and the songs themselves actually interesting. So it's not this generic formula. And he also needs concise, consistent beats, because the thing that the beats lack here, it's not that the beats or the production ever are bad to a fault. It's just that it's so inconsistent. It's hard for the album to ever have a sound.
And I kind of liked when he jumped around with some different song structures.
Sure.
He'd throw in a little breaks here or there, references to his older material.
Absolutely.
He did that So Far.
And that was cool.
Yeah, and that's what made So Far a highlight for me, is I like the story he tells, and I like that he mixed up the structure. He did the same thing in Love Game. You'll notice that most of the tracks are my track picks that he did that.
Exactly. And that's my point.
Yeah.
And I feel like, you know, for him to be that legendary level, for him to have an album that everyone just accepts is one of the best rap albums of all time, for him to do that again, he is going to need to take out all of the noise. Quit trying to put a single on every album that you write that makes your album go diamond. Quit trying to do that. Just simplify it. Stick to what you know, which is rapping and just that incredible delivery. And then also just simplify the beats. Have Dre just lay out simple beats with that really drive bass, that really focus on presenting Eminem's true strength, which is his vocal delivery, his lyrics, and his intensity. Present that at the forefront of every single track, and I guarantee you that album would be considered one of the best rap albums of all time. This isn't the best rap album of all time. It's still good, though. I'm going to go 78 on this.
I'm going 79.
Okay. What did you guys think of the Marshall Mathers LP2? A lot of you guys were asking for this. I'm really interested to hear how you think that this album fits in Eminem's discography. Please leave us a comment at www.velocitiesmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and let us know what albums you'd like to see us review on this channel. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
Take some inventory in his gourd. There's a Ford engine door, hinge, syringe, and orange, an extension cord, and a ninja sword. Not to mention 4 linchpins and a stringent sword iron.